So this is going to be my first video in a lot of years, and a lot of you are like, why are you wearing that stupid hat? And yeah, the main reason is because, fuck you, that's why I like the hat, but also because I'm working the cows and it's raining, and this hat does not impair my brain at all. I'm quite capable of speaking of history and philosophy, even wearing a cowboy hat. So, plus I like cowboy shit, I always have. I grew up on cowboy movies, and that's kind of what I want to talk to. I think it's appropriate for this first post. I grew up on those movies. I love them, and it saddens me when I realize that all those cowboy movies I love so much were propaganda for the state. We think of the Wild West as a symbol of anarchy, as lawlessness, gunfights in the street, mass murder, and nothing could be further from the truth. If you look back in history and the criminal records kept at the time, people weren't conducting mass shootouts. In fact, there were more duels involving Washington politicians and the city elite in Philadelphia than there were in the so-called Wild West. The West was a relatively tame culture. Was there violence? Sure. No society is perfect, and we should get away from trying to argue the perfect society. Yes, there were murders. Yes, there were bad guys. Yes, things happen. But violent crime rates in the so-called Wild West were far less than they were in the much civilized portion of society in the East. So, what we can take from that, though, if we look back in history, so first we can see that it is possible to live in a voluntary society without the long arm of the state intervening. Things aren't going to go wild, people aren't going to die, there's nothing to be afraid of. Those movies presented now as historical fact, as this bad guy comes in and takes over a town and the hero comes in to save it. All that didn't happen. People walking into bars at the time wearing guns, it was a much safer place to be. People weren't walking in and causing a lot of trouble when everybody in there is armed. You sort of knew what to do. When someone in town did, if there was a violent criminal that came into town, so to speak, then they were taken care of. It wasn't, people didn't just let murderers and rapists come in and destroy and take over their town. Contrary to the plot of a lot of movies, it didn't happen. There's no evidence of it happening. The old Western heroes, the Wyatt Earps, the lawmen of the time that created the first gun control laws, that created taxation, that they were able to come in and institute a society of force. Crime from that point rose. They had the monopoly of the state. They had the force of the state with the monopoly of violence behind them. As that civilized society took root, people realized they didn't have to protect themselves anymore. People didn't have to look out for their neighbors. Community devolves. It's opposite of what we think. We think, we're taught that we need structure. We do need structure. We're taught that we need the mafia, the state mafia, to come in and introduce a structure, and that law is the foundation of society. That state mafia that comes in is the crumbling of society. With it comes the welfare state, with it comes the warfare state, with it comes all of those things, and what leaves is personal responsibility and communal relations. I no longer have to take care of my brother. I am no longer my brother's keeper because the state is. In a voluntary society, it's in communities, you have farms, you have people that'll live out away from it, whatever, and they should be able to do whatever they want. Those that choose to live in a community, they take care of each other. It's been that way throughout history. The West didn't become, California's one of the largest economies in the world. It grew from that. It didn't grow from that out of a state. It grew from that out of a state of lawlessness. Yes, out of the absence of a state. But it wasn't a place that people were afraid to go to. It wasn't a place that people were afraid to go and stake claim, and create wealth, and then just what robber barons were going to come in and steal it, nobody would have went. Nobody would have went. That's just not how it went. That's just not how it happened. So when people ask you, when has a libertarian society ever existed? Well, obviously the foundation of the United States, but much more so before the West was won, before the West was lost. That is a true voluntarist society. Voluntarism thrives. What we as human beings are challenged to do is, as that freedom level rises and as that comfort level rises, because it all starts from zero, it all starts from chaos. Like it all starts, that's just life. Life evolves that way, gets, and then we get to a certain level, the struggle, and then we get to a certain level of comfort. And when we get to that level of comfort, we're inclined to turn over some of those responsibilities to someone else, be it in this case a state. We can't do that. When we do that, that's when everything deteriorates, and that's when they're able to write the narrative that we need them. The West was a beautiful, vibrant place that created freedom, that created prosperity. And then we allowed them to come in and take over. We allowed them to, we gave up a little freedom for a lot of security. Then we gave up a little more freedom. And that prosperous thing, California has everything in the world California has beautiful people, beautiful landscape, all the natural resources, everything you could imagine, and people are leaving it in droves 100, 200 years later. That's what it will evolve into if we have the challenge to a human being, to a society, is to take that freedom and keep growing that prosperity without turning it over. Some people will say we need a state to protect natural rights. We don't need a state to protect. States do not protect natural rights. They will always eat natural rights. That is the goal of the state. The goal of the state, any system, constitution, any state, the goal is power. It's just power. A state feeds on power. The food is liberty. Liberty, the state. Anything that exists needs to grow and needs to live, including the state, any government. There is no government. So people say we need that state, we just want a minarchist society. Well, the problem with the minarchist society is there's a government. They say, well, we're bound to get here anyway. We're bound to get to this tyranny anyway. Okay, maybe, perhaps. Evidence would suggest that's true. Right now, I have no argument against that. The only thing I would say back to that is, okay, well, I want to start from the furthest point. Let's not make it easy for them. Let's start as far away as possible. And maybe with the lessons of history that we now have that we didn't have before, because America was an experiment. We didn't know. We didn't know at the time. America was an experiment, and we started at what seemed like a rational place of liberty, that maybe we could chain it and keep it from breaking those chains. We couldn't. We see that now. Now the only next step is voluntarism, a stateless society, freedom. 200 years ago, if we were able to go to a voluntary society tomorrow, in 200 years, would we be back to a tyrannical state? Possibly. I don't know. How could we know? But we do have this time the history to look back on and say, hey, no, man, I'm not willing to give that up for you. I'm not willing to turn that over. There are going to always be people that want it. There are always going to be people who are lazy, who want the state to take care of them. And they should be able to go live in a state. They just shouldn't be able to impose it on us. It's up to us to first create that state, and then to teach our children, and to teach our children how important it is to teach their children, to teach their children, to teach their children, to keep a free society. Anyway, my first video. The rest, if you like this, please subscribe, leave a comment, share. From here on out, this one's just totally unscripted. It's just, it's off the top of my head. I came out here, I was feeding the cows, and it was on my mind. I wanted to get it out. The rest of these there'll be a little more coherence in it. I just, Mike Shaner, for those of you who have forgotten me, it's been a long, long time. And for those that I'm just meeting, I'm just coming aboard, Looking forward to this journey. The rest of these will be a lot more coherent. A lot of these will be a lot more. I'll have an agenda, and I'll stay on topic. This time I just wanted to come out, and this is who I am. I don't know if the hat's going to be here forever. Hey guys, like me, don't like me, whatever. Let's do what we have to do. Let's work together to create a free society. Thanks.